Naki's going to be a little bit late today. She's got a daughter with a flat tire, so that takes
Oh,
precedence over Koviki talk. Not by much, but just enough to be late for the show.
just
So we
enough.
will probably have her in here in a little bit if everything goes well. If not, you got me the whole way, and I'm excited about that either way.
Woohoo!
So Koviki Talk is a multi-episode series where we talk about all things COVID-19. Um, but the difference is it is Pacific Islanders speaking to Pacific Islanders. So it is that old clothing line FUBU, for us, by us. It's by Pacific Islanders for Pacific Islanders. And right now it's all about the vaccine and it's all about numbers. It's trying to tell where are we, where do we need to steer our ship, and what kind of guidance do we need to give our community. So normally at this point, I would turn it over to Naki and she would introduce somebody. But I'm going to do that now. I'm going to talk about an amazing, amazing leader that we have in the Pacific Northwest, Manumalo. Alailima is Samoan and uses he, him, his pronouns. Malo is a co founder and executive director of the United Territories of Pacific Islander Alliances, Portland, or Utopia PDX, and a co founder of the Oregon Pacific Islander Coalition, or OPIC. And she's also the newly appointed direct ED of Not Opo. Malo is also the lead of the Data and Research Council for the National Association of Pacifica Organizations, or Not Opo. Welcome, Malo.
Talafalava, Carl. Thank you for having me.
Definitely. Good to have you. And next we have Dr. Kalani Lukela Raphael. Dr. Raphael is Kanaka Maoli from the island of Oahu and an adult nephrologist at Oregon Health and Science University and Portland, Virginia Medical Center. I think that's Virginia. Is that what the VA is?
The Veterans Hospital.
Veterans, and I was trying to turn that into a state right after Portland. Welcome, doctor.
Hey, thanks. Aloha. Thanks for having me.
Nice, nice. And I don't have a bio for our next guest, but I'm gonna wing it and say that he is an endocrinologist and he is at the City of Hope, and he's also the director or leader of the Happy. And maybe Dr. Samoa can talk a little bit about Happy and the role that it's playing, and then we can get to the information that we have to share today.
Sure, I can do that. Happy stands for the Healing Association of Pacific Islanders. And so we're a group of allied medical health professionals from Pacific Islander origins. We represent the Happy Doctors. Kalani and myself are part of that group. One of the things we've noticed in regards to COVID was our lack of representation and our lack of voice in a lot of different circles. And so I think Naopo is one way, the direct product of that. And so are some of these other organizations that are coming about, such as Happy.
Awesome. That's what happens when there's not a bio in the agenda. We have the guests tell us about themselves. What else? Naki does the icebreaker question, and she didn't leave me one, so I'm gonna make one up. I'm gonna say, well, Dr. Raphael's in Hawaii, so this might not be a great question for him to participate in. But think of a place that you used to live, and what do you miss about that place? And I'll go first, so you know what that kind of looks like. I miss Hawaii. I used to live in Waianae and Kalihi Valley. I miss the weather. I miss the people. I miss the food. I would say I don't miss the cost of living, but I'm in California, so it's not that far behind it. But that's a place that I've lived before, and that's what I miss about it. And if I had to nail it down to one thing, I miss the people. Boy, the food's like a 1A, 1B kind of thing. But that would be how I would answer that. We'll kick this up to the Pacific Northwest and let Malo take a shot at that. Where did you used to live, and what do you miss about that place?
I used to live in the San Francisco Bay Area. So I miss everything. I miss the people, the electricity, the creativity. I I don't miss the cost of living. And I'm always trying to figure out a way to relocate back there. It's not new news. A lot of people already know that my heart's in California. But yeah, Northern California, definitely for me.
We miss you too. Northern California misses you, Malo. Let's go to the happy doctor next. And you're both probably happy, but HAPI, happy.
There's two of us, so I'll defer to Kalani.
All right, right. Yeah, so right now I'm living in Oregon, and before that, I was in Utah for 18 years, and then before that, Washington, and then born and raised on Oahu. But yeah, I mean, I guess the place I just moved from, Utah, I mean, I think what I miss the most, honestly, is the snow. I love the snow, which is weird, yeah, for an island boy. But I love snowboarding. It's just so much fun to get up there and ride on some ice mountains, cruising down, just like surfing a little bit. So it does kind of feel like home, at least up there, except a little bit cold. But yeah, I miss the snow. I miss that a lot. From Hawaii, just miss the ocean, obviously. Body surfing, going out to eat after that, family. Yeah, those kinds of things.
There a specific slope or ski resort or area like Park City or what was your favorite ski slope?
Yeah, this place called Brighton. It's up in one of the canyons called Big Cottonwood Canyon. Good fun, a lot of fun up there.
I could tell that you love it. So it's skiing and snowboarding or just the board?
Just snowboard. I've never been on skis. I was just like, I'm just gonna surf the mountain. Let's just jump on a board.
That makes sense. That's what an island boy would do on the slopes. Not
Yep.
not two, but one.
Just one. Just need one.
Awesome. Dr. Samoa.
Let me see. So I've lived in Washington State and Hawaii predominantly in my life. From Washington, I miss the rain, especially now because it's so hot in California. I know it's not something you think you would miss, but when you leave it, there's actually the rain's very comforting. And from Hawaii, there's so much I miss in Hawaii. I think from Hawaii, I miss the food mostly. We have local food in California, but it's not on the same level. Not anywhere near the same as Hawaii. So those are the things I miss.
Even the chains aren't the same. So you would think like an L&L would be the same wherever you end up, but it's just not the
No,
same.
an L&L in California would not survive 2 days in Hawaii.
Yeah.
It's,
You get a bad name fast and nobody will go back.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have the good thing. What I love about having our doctors on and somebody from our data research is we get information like brand new information, not information that somebody's passed on or that we've heard about. We get the real breaking news, the breaking information, and I think that as we've progressed through this pandemic, it really seems like the numbers are everything. Getting our own numbers, having our own numbers, and sharing our numbers, and giving ourselves information to make decisions on has been huge, and it's just so nice to have people on that are going to talk about that. So I don't know who wanted to go first, and how we wanted to go through this, but we're really excited to have everybody on and discuss the information, the data that we're going to share. So maybe we'll start with
Sure.
Marlo.
I'll start.
Okay, we'll start with Dr. Solomon.
Just to give it a little bit of context. We did a national survey back in April with the help of a lot of our regional groups, and there was so much data that came out of it. We thought one of the most efficient way to get the information out is to do it through regions, states, if you will. And so, because the community-based organization from each state was really pivotal as far as getting information for this survey. We relied on their trust equity from long-standing relationships with the community to get these responses. And so we also knew that we had a large capacity from our medical community that wasn't being tapped into too, to provide context. So the rollout of this data basically includes myself, who analyzed data, the community-based organization from that state, and a physician from that state that most likely will be from Happy. And so that's why you get it wasn't random. The three people that are joining Carl today, we didn't just walk off the street. We actually have a specific purpose in our time together. So with that being said, I'm just going to go through a couple, and then maybe we can get some responses from Kalani and Malo. So we got a fair amount of data. I think with Oregon, a lot of the national advocacy around Oregon has been new, and a lot of it led by Malo and her unbelievable group in Oregon. And we got about 30 responses. So, the fact that Oregon's hardly ever been tapped for any kind of national data collection before, I thought that was a reasonable start for them. We had primarily Samoan respondents. We did not really focus on Native Hawaiians because Native Hawaiians actually are larger in number than Samoans on the continent. But we actually made an agreement with, from the recommendations of our Native Hawaiian experts to let the Indigenous Wellness Research Institute from the University of Washington survey Native Hawaiians. And so we got a couple, but primarily their data collection was done through that group. So as you can see, here's the breakdown. We had some Fijians, Tongans, Marshallese, Chamorro, rounding out the other respondents. And here's a breakdown of the hesitancy and not hesitant around the vaccine. And so you can see the hesitancy is low in Pacific Islanders, in Oregon. But I do want to make sure we know that we have to be very cautious about that kind of reporting because that we didn't get a lot of respondents. And so the primary respondents were women. And as you can see, the breakdown of the hesitant and non-hesitant was skewed more towards not hesitant, and there wasn't any gender imbalance in regards to that. This is a breakdown of educational attainment and vaccine hesitancy. Unlike other states, there was a strong direction where the lower your educational attainment, the more suspicious you were going to be of the vaccine. That was seen on the national level, but it was also seen in most of the states. In Oregon, it's not as clean. You don't see the numbers break out as much that way. You see a fair smattering of hesitancy throughout the different educational attainment categories. And same thing with income. So nationally and in most of the states, vaccine hesitancy follows income. The less you make, the more hesitant you're going to be to get the vaccine. I think in California, if your highest education level attainment was a high school diploma or a GED equivalent, 89% of those people were hesitant to get the vaccine. And then here's a breakdown of the essential worker status in regards to vaccine hesitancy. So you can see the thing that should be very clear is that we have a high percentage of vaccine hesitancy. Sorry, a high percentage of essential workers in Pacific Islanders, and for the most part, we didn't see the breakout of hesitancy, regardless of whether or not you're an essential worker. And so that's it for now. I just, think that maybe we can provide context. The other thing that I want to be very clear about is, even though the vaccine hesitancy is low, the case rate and the mortality rate for Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders in Oregon is still the highest compared to any other ethnic or racial group. So, yay, vaccine hesitancy high, but we're still dying. So, you can't take your eye off of that ball as well. But I think it's a perfect time now to try to get context out of those data, since we have two experts sitting right in front of us.
So was there real quick, were there things that surprised you as you started collecting the data and knowing what the questions were? Were there things that surprised you in the outcomes?
I think I don't know if surprise, more or less reconfirmed. Like, I think we all knew that there's pockets of our community that have higher hesitancy, and it caught it, right? Like, and it's the people that are the most ignored. The people who have lower educational attainment, lower income. Those are the ones that get the least of our attention. So I knew that was brewing, but to see it in the numbers we're seeing it at really shows how strong that effect is. And so I think it's really important that we get context out of this, because we're not going to fix that in the near future, right? We're not going to give everybody six-figure jobs, or graduate everybody with a college degree next week. That's not going to happen. So we have to figure out how to make up this gap. Like, how do we get into those areas where we're the most vulnerable? And so I it's my silo. I live in the medical area, and the areas that we're talking about that influences decisions, like income, education, that's not me. That's not us. But we got to learn how to work with groups that cross those silos. And luckily for us, we have community-based organizations who've been doing this kind of work for decades. And so I think that's why it's important that we learn from them and figure out what they need to move the needle.
That makes sense. Malo, seeing Oregon's numbers and seeing the data that's out there, were there things that you were expecting to see that confirmed things that you thought going in? And were there any things that stood out when the data came out and you said that's kind of surprising? Or was it kind of even keeled with things that you expected?
I think it's a mixed bag. With this small sample that we are dealing with, it's just one indicator. As you could tell, it's the majority of the respondents were female. Another indicator was that very Samoan heavy. And I think just drawing from those two demographics, I'm trying to be careful about that framing and what type of messaging that would send. But as it's leaning toward the less hesitancy to be vaccinated, I'm hoping that, we did a great job in doing our messaging earlier on when we're talking about getting tested, what the virus actually is and isn't. On top of that, how we can help with wraparound services if folks become infected. So I think everyone was doing their part to try not to get infected, especially since many of us at the very beginning lost family members and friends to COVID-19. And, we just didn't want for anyone else to go through that experience. And this survey was conducted earlier this year. So it was right around the time when the first batch of eligible people had the opportunity to become vaccinated.
Dr. Raphael, are there things to be extrapolated out of this, or is the timing like? What do you take away out of the timing from when we're gathering the data? We're now looking at the data, but to Malo's point, it's not current. So we're more looking at it at a current time where we're in this huge spike. It's a different kind of time than actually when we gathered the data. Is that relevant, or is that something that you look at it and say the data is the data? We work off of that.
No, it definitely changes. I mean, and that has to be kept in mind. I think as more and more people got vaccinated, maybe within families, and people didn't have a reaction, maybe people became more accepting of the vaccine. So it's kind of like looking at like death rates over time. A death rate in one population could be at one level early in the pandemic, but then change over time. And so that's kind of when you have to look at what's called an incident rate, which is the number of new cases, not just the overall, because the overall, while it does say something, it doesn't tell you how something is looking at this snapshot in time. I would like to just say that with respect to this survey, there's varying degrees of hesitancy, right? You can be like completely hesitant and say absolutely not, or you can be like I was thinking of an analogy, right? Like the first time I jumped off the bridge into the ocean, right? I'm going to hesitate a little bit, but I'm going to go for it at some point, right? So there's varying degrees of hesitancy, right? I mean, like everything, like, am I going to hesitate to take this pill that the doctor told me to take for my high blood pressure? Yeah, I might think about it. But I think what we're hoping really to get a handle on is like the number of people who are vaccinated. And I think Oregon, probably Malo, you can really share that. But I think Oregon has really done a nice job in terms of the percentages of Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islanders who've been vaccinated here in this state. But we just have to keep that in mind. Like, what does hesitancy mean? There are varying degrees of hesitancy, but ultimately, is somebody going to get vaccinated? And I think one other thing to think about is who decided to respond to this survey, right? What kind of person is that going to be? Maybe it's someone who feels much more strongly about getting vaccinated, or feels much more strongly about not getting vaccinated. And those would be people who would be more likely to respond. So we don't really know, I think, just based off of the small number of people, how this translates overall into what it means for the Native Hawaiian Pacific Islander community. But I mean, it's a place to start, and it's a place to evolve from, and to keep collecting the data and expanding and doing a better job of refining what we're asking people, and trying to get it out to the broader community and encourage them to actually respond to it, because it is helpful for, I think, all the like the CBOs. I think, for example, like they really use this information to guide them to address these areas that can really make an impact. If they know what the community is thinking, then that's how they can respond to it.
I think that's a really good point of that there's varying degrees of hesitancy. I think it's real easy to just say, look, people are either 100% for it or they're 100% against it. And it seems as we get like polarized in politics or in the country, where it's like it's hard drawn lines. And I think that I never really thought about that hesitancy could mean different things to different respondents. It could mean, like you said, I'm hesitating, but I'm going to go anyway, or I'm holding off right now for a reason, but then I'm going to go, or it could mean like absolutely never. I'm never going to do that. And it seems like today in today's media is just easier to think of it as being two completely different halves. Gonna get it no matter what, never gonna get it. And that's a great point. From the community standpoint, Malo, are do you see the varying degrees of hesitancy? Like the people that are trying to educate themselves to get more information to make a better decision, or I mean, are you seeing those kind of things? Because that is the way that Dr. Raphael framed that is really a good way of looking at like we have shots, didn't mean it that way, but we have the opportunity to to sway people and give them more information because they may not be that hard line absolutely not never.
Sure. I think as we're seeing like data through our hospital systems, and OHSU is one that posts regularly about their capacity and like who's actually being hospitalized with regard to those who are unvaccinated. And a small percentage of people who are vaccinated that are being hospitalized. I mean, just seeing those figures from different hospital systems, right? So I think I've shared this yesterday. Representative Jayapal from Washington State shared that it's a bit over 17,000 to hospitalize somebody who has COVID, and the vaccine is free. So I think to Dr. K's point, that evolution of thought, of having more available information coming directly from our hospital systems is helpful for people to see like, wow, there's like 80% of unvaccinated people that are being hospitalized. 90% of that are in ICU and using ventilators, and 90% of the folks are dying are unvaccinated. And it's not just one particular hospital. It's like across the board, state to state, throughout the nation. So I think it's probably that reality that the Delta variant is moving very swiftly and harshly throughout many of our communities. That's one. I think we've all experienced, at least in my family and extended families, that we've seen a lot more of our folks getting sick and diagnosed with COVID, as well as deaths. So, that spiked up, in the past like month and a half. And I think for folks that have been borderline or on the fence about getting the vaccine are probably saying, wow, I can't handle another funeral. It's costly. These hospital bills are becoming costly. Maybe this vaccine is the answer. There's also another aspect, as there's this federal mandate for public employees that they need to, get vaccinated or have, some type of objection, religious objection, or medical excuse from their doctor to not get the vaccination. And so if you're going to lose your job and, you don't qualify for public benefits or unemployment, I think that's also a factor. My livelihood, is dependent on whether or not I become vaccinated. So I think there's a lot of different factors that are playing a huge role in how people might be shifting their mentality towards hesitancy.
Dr. Samoa, in your circles with City of Hope and your role in Happy, do you see that? So it's the Delta variant now, and it could be a different name of a variant down the line. Do you see like a new campaign or new I guess campaign or new educational process for of each series variant that comes out? Like it just seems like the disinformation every time there's new data or there's new kind of twist, it's like the misinformation seems to match the true information, right? So, and actually, this isn't just for Dr. Samoa; it's for anybody. But do you feel like that there needs to be almost like a information wave every time something new comes out? When it was testing, we were trying to educate everybody about testing. When it was the vaccine, then it's the Delta variant. Do you feel the push against the misinformation and the roles that you play? I'll start with Dr. Samoa.
Not clinically, as an advocate, yes, but I think I'll defer to Kalani because I think he's has, because I'm a cancer hospital. We have a specific population that we deal with, um, and Kalani's in the university system, and might have a different experience.
Yeah, can you rephrase that question just so I'm
I'm
clear
just
about
wondering.
what
It feels like to me when the Delta variant came out, it was like, there was a lot of awareness to the Delta variant, but then the misinformation came right behind it. Like, so that if you were trying to learn things, you had to filter out things like that's good information, that's quality information, that's not quality information. You know what I mean? So, as new things come up with the pandemic, does the medical field feel pressure to counter the misinformation that's always out there?
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean it's a constant battle. I mean, uh yeah, I mean I have patients that, come from all walks of life, people with, all kinds of backgrounds and, I ask them, are you going to get vaccinated? Have you gotten vaccinated? And, you get the different reactions, right? And then you just hear what some of them are told and like they hold on to it. And, it's like mentally taxing to just, I mean, as a doctor, like you only have so much time with a person, right, in the clinic, and you can't spend, 95% of it trying to convince them that the stuff that they're hearing is wrong. Because you got to deal with like why their kidneys are failing and what they got to do about that. But it's really frustrating. I think for a lot of us, because there's just like it's an endless like set of new lies that can come out, and you can't defend against everyone every time. It's just there's so much fatigue to it, that really is impactful. Yeah. So to answer your question, absolutely, the medical community is always worried about this and trying to come up with ways to do a better job of getting people the information that is truthful, scientific, and not just made up based off of somebody's like gut feeling about how the way science works. Yeah.
I think
Yeah, Carl.
well,
So the one of the things we noticed, because there was about 1,200 respondents in the national survey, and one of the clear things we noticed was the difference in the hesitancy per state. Yeah, I think we talked about this in the California episode. Was that in and this is not to be political. This is just data. In the Western states, in those blue states, the hesitancy was lower. I think in Washington and Oregon, the hesitancy rate was a little over 25%, and it peaked in California at about 39%, and then Hawaii was in between that. In the red states of Utah, the hesitancy was up at 67%, and in Arkansas it was 71%. So my point isn't to bring this into like a political discussion. My reason for bringing this up is there are people that our community are listening to that we don't agree with, and we have to figure out, if those elected officials in those states, care about Native Hawaiian and Pacific Island communities, as they should, not just because it's the right thing, but also because these communities support industry. A lot of them are the main drivers of a lot of agricultural industries in those areas, and so their health is vital to their economies. They need to jump on the message too, right? They need to help us spread the information, the right, regarding the safety of vaccines, and encourage their use. Because it's like Kalani said, we can't fight every argument that comes our way. And we have to figure out how to pair with these sources, whether people are getting their information. And the other part about it too is, oftentimes when I met with somebody who is completely entrenched in those wacko websites or those conspiracy theories regarding the vaccine and anything that's related to protective behaviors, wearing masks, social distancing, the vaccine, that they're entirely opposed to because someone else is feeding them that. I often tell them, those people that you're getting the information from, what will happen if something happens to you? Nothing. They will not drop one tear if something happens to you, right? And so it's those of us who gave up, who's given our life to practice medicine, study the science of medicine, to advocate for our communities. Those, we're the ones that are going to grieve your loss. We're the ones that are going to answer the call, if you have questions about what to do. And so if we're good enough at that point, to listen to, why are we not listening to, why aren't you listening to us before that?
So true. So true that where do you value your information coming from? You know what I mean? Like if it's I don't know, a mechanic, then that might not be where I want to get my legal information. Like maybe the mechanic knows a whole bunch about the law. I don't know. Probably not as much as if I go look for a lawyer. Um, but I just think about my doctor's appointments and the small amount of time that I have with my doctor when he comes in the room and he's able to see me. That discussion is about my health. And if he's got to convince me to take care of my own health, you know what I mean? Like that I was just thinking, like, how do you do that with the small amount of time that you have with the doctor when they come into the room? And the nurse, they come in, they get you prepped, they take your blood pressure and everything, and then the doctor comes in, and it is like valuable time, valuable minutes with that authority on your health. And that's why I was just thinking, like, how do you overcome that? um Malo, from a community CBO standpoint, how do you deal with, and how does your organization deal with misinformation? And I know that you're all about education, you're all about awareness and getting information out there, and being on social media and all those kind of things. But I can just think of, every time something new comes out, new information comes out, how do you stay ahead of that, or how do you address that?
It's a lot of patience, and just being really gentle with our community members. They all are influenced, either by religion, politics, both. Other family members that, talk to them about how they feel about the virus, the vaccine, what's real, what's not, what's fake, what's not. I think just continually having a campaign with good, current, accurate information that comes out of, like, the CDC or the Department of Human Services. We're currently still doing the We Can Do This campaign. Let's get vaccinated. So I think just having different looks at how do we message to our people, and the various Pacifica languages that we have available. Other community members, leaders that are sharing their story for why they've been vaccinated. And we pretty much approached, youth, elders was our first campaign with Kaiser Permanente, woven with elders. When we first were doing the campaign in early February, So we've been kind of addressing the different demographics within our very diverse Pacifica community, and we're still coming up with different ways. Like currently, Utopia is partnering with the Samoa Pacific Development Corporation, leaving outside the Portland area to help Southern Oregon, as well as rural part of Oregon in the Dalles, to get our people vaccinated in these two areas that don't get attention, like if you are in the Tri-County area of Multnomah County, Washington County, or Clackamas County, which you could see that our vaccination rates are very high. But in our smaller places that we do have a Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander presence, they're struggling, but we're hearing them. You know, they're approaching us to say, hey, can you help, you know, our families? And can you help, you know, us get our people vaccinated? So having, you know, people on the ground that are reaching out to us, well, we're reaching right back, and we're going to help you, and we're going to help get our people vaccinated. To be able to save more lives and to prevent severe illness and death, that's like our priority right now. So if there's people willing to work with us, we'll come and find you, and we'll help you get our people vaccinated.
Dr. Kalani, how is it in Hawaii? You know, I always think of, like, you know, when we talk about the resources being overrun, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know if you're in Arizona, then.
Well, I should clarify. I'm in Oregon, actually.
Oh, you're in Oregon. I don't know why I thought Hawaii.
I was born and raised there. I think that's probably why.
I got you. The what do you think is important for us right now, in terms of addressing the push now? Like, what is the priority right now for the CBO role in Oregon? What's the biggest message that you need to get across to the community?
I mean, get vaccinated. It's really pretty plain and simple.
Simple as that.
Yeah, I mean, so we just went through our big surge here in Oregon last week, and you know, I'm an adult nephrologist, which means I take care of people with kidney problems. And like, my family is kind of surprised when I tell them, like, I take care of people with COVID, and they're like, why? Like, how does that affect your kidneys? Well, the way it affects your kidneys is if you get sick enough from COVID and you need to go on a breathing machine, basically you're an organ failure and all of your organs shut down, including your kidneys. And those are the ones that I got to see to put them on life-saving dialysis. Otherwise they're going to die. But I mean, we were slammed. We were so busy. I mean, I had never experienced anything like that in my life before. It was just getting calls. Another COVID needs dialysis. Another COVID needs dialysis. And by the time that's the case, it's like they're not going to survive this. I mean, basically, they're done, you know. And what is really, really frustrating is, like, this person didn't need to die from this. They just needed a vaccine. And I just want to go back to what Ray said, is like, where are those people now that we're telling them, nah, no need get vaccine. You don't need it. That's stupid, right? It's all political. It's, you know, where is that person now that person's died, right? Where is the responsibility back to that person or that group of people? And it's really sad. Like, I saw a lot of people die in 1 week. They were all unvaccinated. And it's just like, you didn't need to die. All you had to do was get a shot. You didn't need to die. And if you do survive this, guess what? You're going to have a bill for like $2-3 million. I'm serious. It's going to be insane. And you're going to have to go through all sorts of rehab. You're just never going to be the same. You really aren't. You know, if you have to be on a breathing tube, you know, they can't leave that tube in your throat forever. So they put in what's called a tracheostomy. And so they're breathing through that. You know, you have that kind of tube sticking out of your throat. You know, that's going to take a long time to get over. You know, if you ended up on dialysis because your kidney shut down, you may never get off dialysis ever again. You may be destined for dialysis for the rest of your life. If your lungs don't heal, you might need a lung transplant. If your heart doesn't recover, you might need a heart transplant. I mean, people just don't, they think of like, oh, I'm going to get a cold, you know, but it's really devastating, you know, and everybody thinks it's not going to happen to them. But, you know, tell that to the 30, 40, 50-year-old people that I saw die last week just because they didn't get, and you know, age to me doesn't matter, right? You know, sure, there might be less risk, but if you're 30 and you die from this, you're 30 and you died from it, and you could have just gotten a vaccine. So, yeah, I mean, it's just really sad to see these people die when they didn't have to. And you know what? They die alone. No one's there with them. They can't, family's not allowed. They just die alone. And that person who told them, nah, none of you get vaccinated, they're not there. It's really awful. So I just wanted to share that because I don't know if people like really kind of see the insider aspect of like what happens in the ICU when things go bad. But it's really awful. I mean, I haven't even talked about like Ecmo. What is Ecmo? Ecmo is when we take blood out of your body and we artificially oxygenate it because we can't put enough oxygen into the breathing tube to keep someone alive. And that's just another like super invasive way to try to keep somebody alive. And a lot of times it doesn't work. So.
Yeah, no, we're at a cancer hospital, and for a long time we weren't taking any COVID patients, but Los Angeles was so overrun with COVID that we had to open our doors. And you know, first it started with like 8 beds, and then 8 beds turned into 16 beds, and then 16 beds turned into 24 beds, and then to 40 beds. So we have 40 beds that don't have patients with cancer in them, right? And so that means 40 people who should be in the hospital because they have cancer can't get in, right? Because we're taking care of COVID patients. And so, you know, this whole idea that this one little choice that you have to make only affects you, oh, you know, that's really that's not true at all. Like, you have huge ramifications, and this is just your one little responsibility. You know, you don't have to do anything else for the rest of the pandemic. You know, if that's the least you could do is to get the vaccine. And so, you know, I echo what Kalani said, because I bet you Malo, his brother would want the vaccine. I bet you Rita would want the vaccine. My uncle Fue would want the vaccine, but they're no longer here, you know. And all 500,000 people, because we're over 600,000 people dead. I bet you at least 500,000 of those people would want the vaccine, you know. And it's crazy that you have to, you know, that we're constantly telling people we can end this pandemic, and you know, misinformation and politics are keeping this pandemic, you know, from ending.
And that's where I wanted to get to it on this show, is the point that it's real talk, and I really appreciate all three of you having passionate words, because I think we always talk about information is power, right? And I think that at this point, the Pacific Islander community needs to understand that misinformation, as valuable as information is, misinformation can be that much damaging. It can hurt you the other direction. So if you're getting misinformation, these are the points where you've got Pacific Islander doctors on here talking about what happens in the hospital, what happens when they're trying to keep people alive. This isn't like a conspiracy theory where it's somebody that, we don't know, or it's some unknown, faceless, nameless, some doctor I've never heard of. Like, so to the PIs that are watching this, is real talk from people on the front lines. It's real talk from CBOs that are out there, boots on the ground, trying to make a difference and trying to get real information out there. Misinformation it can be extremely dangerous. And that's kind of where, I'm really glad that we were able to have this kind of talk. And I know, Dr. Kalani, thank you so much for sharing, because I think those words need to be heard. Those things need to be heard by, that people see Pacific Islanders doctors talking about this. I
Yeah,
know
happy
that
doctors are really useful. We can be
very
very,
useful,
very useful.
but don't look for Dr. Kalani in Hawaii. Look for him in Oregon. it's the pigeon accent. It just makes me put you back in Hawaii. Um, I know that Malo had some information that she was going to share about OPIC, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Oregon Pacific Islander Coalition, or OPIC, we convened a year and a half ago, and we've been going strong since then. And I wanted to recognize our community-based organizations that have been very effective with our COVID-19 testing, with our COVID-19 vaccination clinics, as well as wraparound services or referrals for that. So we have Ka'ala Hui O'Olakona Hawaiian Civic Club, or Kalo HCC. We have Leo O'ofa, Living Islands, the Micronesian Islander community, the Oregon Marshallese Community Association, Regagal Balau, Samoa Pacific Development Corporation, the Tongan Alliance Resource Committee, the Tongan Women's Association of Oregon, and Utopia PDX. We've been hitting the ground running in all the directions, and I want to give a huge shout out to Leo Olfa, Living Islands, and Kalo HCC. Washington County was the first county in Oregon to reach 80% vaccination rate. But, if you look at the data throughout the state of Oregon, Native Hawaiians and Pacific Islanders have the highest rate for vaccination among all races and ethnicities. So great job, everyone. I'm so proud of you. And we still got a lot of work to do. So let's go find our people who need to get vaccinated.
Thank you, Malo. Are there takeaways that at this point in the pandemic and all the things that we've gone through as a people? And I just always go back to, that the Pacific Islanders, when we got called on to help, we dove in. Nobody really knew exactly, like, I don't know a whole bunch of epidemiologists when this whole thing started. I didn't know a whole bunch of people that knew anything about it. But when we said, "Hey, you're needed. You need it. You're needed for this. You're needed for that," everybody raised their hand and came to the table to help each other. That's the takeaway that I have with this whole thing and where it evolves to. I love watching. I love seeing the ride. But what I take away from this whole thing is that we can, only us is going to save us. And I think that we've done a good job as a community, as a people coming together to fight this. So, takeaways of yours, Dr. Samoa?
Be careful if you answer my call.
I can vouch for that.
No, I'm so humbled. The travesty of COVID has brought out some really dark parts of our community, but it's also shown a beacon on some of the pretty amazing resources that we have. And I think if we can hold true and work together to get this, to ensure that we continuously have resources for our community, we're going to come out better after COVID. But it's tireless work, and what I do oftentimes gets strongly credited, although let's just say there's a couple of anti-vaxxers that aren't happy with me, but for the most part, people shower accolades upon physicians during the pandemic, and I hope that the same is happening for our community-based organizations. Because what we do in the hospital, it's the work that's being done in the community is just as important. The testing drives, the vaccine drives, the food security, the distributions, the work pay, money distribution, all of that is an unbelievably tough work, and our CBOs went into that work regardless if there's money there. They went in with pure intent, and luckily they've come out the better for it because they bound together, and they're learning from each other, but also knowing that their voice is strong together, and that people are listening now. So, thank you so much for the inspiration, not just you guys, but also, Naki and Carl with Koviki Talks. And Kalani, I'm always a big fan of yours, both professionally and socially. So, yeah, I don't know if any of that made sense, but that's it for now because my throat hurts.
Makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense. We're going to go up north to Oregon to the CBO that we've been talking about. Malo, any takeaways that you have at this point in the whole pandemic situation, and are people responding to it?
Yeah, definitely. We are stronger together, unified. I think we have an advocacy platform that works now. And we have such amazing Pacific Islander leaders in the Oregon Pacific Islander Coalition and all of the different Pacific Islander CBOs that make up the collective. We're finally moving toward a place where we can build capacity and actually pay our hardworking, passionate, and compassionate volunteers. So that was something that we recognized earlier on, that I knew all the people that I was working together with was committed because we were doing it for free. After we were done with our 9 to 5, we would put in the work well after hours on the weekends. And so just to be able to see, CBO after CBO get the ability to start building their capacity so that they can pay staff to actually do this hard work that we've been doing, it's amazing. But it takes a lot of patience, and it also takes tenacity. And I'm just so proud of all of our CBOs that are part of OPIC that have been helping our community during their time of need, but also trying to help save their lives by getting them vaccinated.
Thank you, Malo. Hard work is hard work. Sometimes people don't understand that. And we're not going to Hawaii. We're going to stay right in Oregon. We're going to talk to Dr. Kalani Raphael, and he's going to give us his takeaways at this point.
I was just in the airport in Utah recently, and they have these like lab test stations now where you can get tested for COVID, before you fly to wherever it is. And I looked at my daughter and I said, out of everything in life, no matter how bad it is, there can be an opportunity, right? You would have never had that testing station up there, 2 years ago. But the analogy here is that I think what this stimulated was us coming together in ways that we never would have imagined before, like Naupo coming together, like Hoppy, right? Like Ray and we've been talking about getting together PI physicians together for, I don't know, a decade, but life goes on and we're busy people, right? And, I've got to write my grants and I've got to see patients and I've got to work in the hospital. It's like, but then when this thing happened, you put in the effort, you put in the volunteerism because it's important to you and it's important to your communities that you come from. But the opportunity that came out of this is like building up these partnerships and building up, these things like Malo is talking about, where you can actually pay people to do the work that they deserve to be paid for, not to just do it because it's out of the kindness of their heart. I mean, that's also why they're doing it. But if you put in the work and you put in the effort, we can build from this. And I think we have, and I think it's been maybe the kick in the pants we needed, perhaps. Maybe not the nicest, kindest way to do it, at the cost of lives. But, the pandemic certainly wasn't our fault. It was something that we responded to because there wasn't a whole lot of help from other people, I would say. And so a lot of people really took it upon themselves to help the community. And, positive things can come out of even the most negative and dreadful scenarios. And I think that's my big takeaway, is that we've made the best out of this situation that we possibly could, I think.
I'm a firm believer in that. Things happen for us, not to us. And we got to find a way to benefit from something out of this. And I think that the actions the community has taken and the ability to just say, I'm not sure what I'm doing. Like Dr. Samoa had asked us to get involved with a show that ended up becoming Koviki Talk. And Naki and I didn't know that. We said yes. We both said yes. And then we got on the phone with each other and we're like, what do we do? What did we say yes to? We're not sure, but it's supposed to help. So we're going to do it. And I think that a whole bunch of people did the same thing. A whole bunch of people got asked to help and they just dove in. So what is the takeaway that I have, is that, we will respond. We'll make this into something for us, not to us. And I'm honored to be on the show with Dr. Kalani Raphael, Dr. Reno Samoa of the Happy Doctors, HAPI. And I'm not sure how many executive director positions Malo has up there in Oregon. She's too many to count. So everything that you're doing and your leadership roles in the community, we appreciate you. Thank you all for showing up. This is Koviki Talk. We are here every Monday from 5 to 6 Pacific time. Naki does this part. I'm stumbling through this. We're here every Monday from 5 to 6 Pacific time. Come back next week and see Koviki Talk with us. Thank you.